Today I want to talk about 7 ways to live a life worthy of the gospel. There are many ways to live a life worthy of the gospel, but today I want to share with you or give you 7 of the most important ways to live a life worthy of the gospel of Jesus Christ according to none other than the Apostle Paul. So let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome back to Reason for Truth. Truth comes first, and we back it up with all the reasons from the scriptures, from logic, from just common sense, and from truth. And then what we do is, listen, we make sure we teach well and accurately, because once we do that, you learn accurately and you learn well. Anyways, in the Apostle Paul's letter written to the Philippian church in 61 AD, Paul wrote this: "Only let your manner of life be what? Worthy of the gospel of Christ." Philippians 1:27a. Today I want to answer what God tells us through Paul as to how you and I can live or ought to live our life worthy of the gospel. Now I want to fast forward as a start point all the way to verse 29, which expounds on what Paul is getting to regarding the how we become more worthy of the gospel. Paul wrote this: "For it has been granted to you that for the sake of Christ you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake." Philippians 1:29. So what exactly is Paul saying here? Well, in order to understand verse 29, we need to understand verses 22 to 30, right? This one verse doesn't give you the full context. Those verses say this: "Only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or I'm absent, I may hear of you that you are standing firm in one spirit." We're going to talk about that. One mind. We're going to talk about that as well. Striving side by side for the faith of the gospel. What a novelty. Anyways, and not frightened in anything by your opponents. There's a lot of chock full of nuts here to go over. Now I want to talk about, "For it has been granted to you for the sake of Christianity that you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake. Engaged in the same conflict that you saw I had and now hear and I still have." And then Paul goes on to write, "This is a clear sign to them of their destruction, but of your salvation, and that from God. For it has been granted to you that for the sake of Christ you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake, engaged in the same conflict that you saw I had and now hear and I still have." Man, breaking this whole passage down, let's jump right in and learn 7 key ways in which Paul told the church of Philippi and you and I today regarding how we are and can and are to live a worthy life of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So number 1, Paul says, let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ. This is a big swath statement that is broken down in the rest of the passage. We're going to get to that. Number 2, he goes on to say, "that I may hear that you are standing firm in one spirit." Verse 27. I'd like to expound on that. As believers, we must be authentically unified. This means no backbiting, gossiping, or selfish ambition. Good luck. It means that by saying that we must stand firm in the gospel in one spirit, which is in and of itself, as well as guided by the gospel word of God, Jesus Christ. I think really we need to be one. We have to make sure that out of selfish ambition, we all have those temptations. Sadly, most Christians want to see others succeed, but often not more than ourselves, right? I think that's up to God and up to us, the effort we put in. So listen, number 3, that I hear you are standing firm in one mind. That's in the mind, the head. Verse 27, the mind is not speaking to the emotion or how we feel about something, but we know to be true about the word of God. Then he goes on, he breaks down, he says, working as a team, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel. Verse 27, paraphrased. Even if we don't get along super well with another believer, in many cases we are called to simply get along with them. In other words, I've heard it say, listen, I don't have to like you, but I have to love you. We have to get along well enough with them to work together with some people. We should try to get along well with everybody and appreciate everyone's differences than our own. If we go back to number 2 and avoid gossip, backbiting, and selfish ambition, working as a team is fairly easy in that we simply do what we are called to do in light of working with other Christians and not seen as just want to be the boss or to take over the process or the oxygen in the room. It's number 4. Number 5, he says not frightened or terrified is another better way to use that word in the original language, in anything by your opponents. Now, verse 28, let's be honest in that the characters on the television are often very subpar, to say the least. And when we talk about our enemies, why are we fearful of our enemies? Whether the authorities, I'm not saying that we should be afraid of the authorities, but by the same token, it's really our reputation that's going to soften them. When they see us doing good and standing strong on truth and good, they tend to be calmed down a lot. Not always, but if we compromise ourselves, well, we compromise our witness. This is very true in Christian ministries as well. We often think, well, that's the world. No, that's just as true in Christian ministries, if not more so in some cases. And in any case, remember that these people who are rulers put their pants on one leg at a time. They're no different than you and I. They just happen to be in a privileged position. And with that privileged position comes an eternal responsibility that, listen, I don't care what they believe and what we believe. The truth is what God says, and that is that all are going to come to account for what we've been given. So what we could do is pray for our leaders. We should first reflect and worry about ourselves. Remember that old lesson from yesteryear, and more so than we worry about others. Corrupt politicians, we complain about them all the time, as we should in many ways, but we also make sure that we look upon ourselves. Listen, if we think rightly and we vote rightly, we're going to get more rightfully acting, politicians to rule us. But the power they hold is very real, by the way, here on earth. But I like the word of God in Matthew says, and do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him, that's God, who can destroy both the soul and the body in hell. Matthew 10:28. Life is short, folks. We see all these people. I'm looking at Jimmy Carter at his age. I remember when he was elected. I was very young. But I remember that Chuck Colson, buried him a few years ago. He did great things for the kingdom. Billy Graham just passed away. He was almost 100. What great things he did. Listen, we all have a certain amount of time. We can use these things, our life, for good, as many of these Chuck Colson, Billy Graham did. Or we could do these things for bad and evil, as we've seen many of their political leaders. Your courage is and will be a clear sign to the opponents of their destruction and your salvation from God himself, verse 28. That doesn't mean we throw things in their face, and it certainly doesn't mean we insult them or use poor language about them on the internet or even with others. The word terrified, remember I was talking about that? We're not to be terrified or frightened. It's a term, really, that was used of the terror of a panicked horse. You ever seen a horse that's spooked? We used to have a horse many, many years ago, decades ago. When you spook a horse, that horse, you want to just move away from that horse. If you're a horse trainer, you could handle that. Well, you go try to calm that horse. That's not me. And what Matthew's talking about here is the Philippians are not to be terror-stricken in the face of their enemies. Neither should we. Their courage would be really proof of their salvation and the ultimate failure of their foes. People see that. You ever seen that? People, a foe, it's like, I'm thinking on Unbroken. The Italian guy, World War II. The bottom line is he forgave all his captors, World War II. And the one guy who wouldn't forgive him is a guy named Byrd. He was the main guy. The reason why he got under Byrd's skin was simple, because Byrd couldn't break him. He kept that spirit. Now, he wasn't a believer at that time, but he did become a believer later. And God used that in that movie greatly. I wanted you to check that out, Unbroken. But listen, number 7, along with this mission comes calling that assumes some level of suffering. All right? And we have to accept that. We have to accept that life has calling, life has joy, and life has suffering. But in the end, joy can even be found in suffering. Happiness cannot, but joy can. Paul, hanging upside down with Timothy in their cell, they experience joy. They're singing. All right, number 7, 8. And in the end, you're going to be seen by God and by man as having a life led in a manner worthy of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's the secret. In conclusion, in closing, let your manner of life be worthy. It's a political term, by the way, which means live as citizens here in, biblically speaking, of heaven, 3:20, chapter 3, verse 20. And to do this, believers should stand strong, strive, and even in suffering, reflect God's goodness, even as painful as that may be, because listen, you only suffer for a short period of time, and then God brings that into calmer water. But the Philippian church was kind of in the same boat as Paul himself with all of this, and that's why he said, let your conduct, which sets the tone for how we're to act in verse 27. The word used here refers to discharging the obligations of a citizen, because the Philippian church and the Philippians in general held a privileged state as an Italian Roman colony. Its citizens understood the responsibilities, by the way, and associated with that citizenship, and it's within our conduct that we are to stand fast, striving together for the faith. In other words, they had to make sure their reputation was upheld. A good name was worth more than gold and silver. Just did an episode on that. It might be out already. It might be coming out. I don't know which one I'm going to release first. But, in the end, as we wrap up, God never intended believers to be alone. Listen, his plan is that we should gather together in fellowship at the church and outside the church, strengthen and encourage one another, not backbite. Chapter 2, verse 2. Paul was urging them to strive together, not just with the sake of the individual faith, but also on behalf of the truth of Christianity, their common faith. And these are the 7 ways that God gives us as how you and I should live our lives worthy of the gospel. That's all I could say on that one. Make sure you do a couple things. You want to get some in-depth training, go to equippedacademy.com. Got a new course on understanding money and gold, fiat money. Why isn't dollar bills worth anything? Well, it's made out of paper, so is toilet paper. But gold is not. And mess with gold. Gold is God's money. That's what the course is called. And besides that, check out my community. Go there. You want stuff that's not put anywhere else, StephenGarofalo.com. You're not going to see it up there in any of the other social media outlets. That's all I could say. Besides one thing, make sure you subscribe, like. We'll see you at the next video. I'm your host, Stephen Garofalo, and this is your Reason for Truth for today.